Our family backgrounds matched, and our ages were suitable, so James and I entered into an arranged marriage. But he had his cinnabar mole, and I had my white moonlight. His cinnabar mole betrayed him, and my white moonlight let me down. After our marriage, we seamlessly cooperated and became the model couple in our circle. Meanwhile, the cinnabar mole and white moonlight suddenly had their awakening and entered the regret zone. But as the saying goes, emotions are hard to control, and fake love can turn real. A month before my engagement with James, we formally met for the first time. James chose a restaurant on the rooftop terrace overlooking the river, offering a stunning view of the city at night. While heading there after work, my best friend Amelia texted me. I did some digging. James is a solid guy. You can proceed. When I arrived, James was on a work call, sleeves of his black shirt rolled up, speaking fluent German. Noticing me, he gave an apologetic look, and I shook my head to signal that it was okay. James talked for about 10 minutes, and in those 10 minutes, my thoughts wandered everywhere. 1. James likely studied in Germany for his undergraduate degree. Rumor says it was because of his white moonlight. 2. He wasn't wearing sleeve garters today, and while his shirt wasn't as pristinely formal, it carried a casual elegance. Speaking of sleeve garters, it reminded me of our first meeting at his equestrian club. He wore sleeve garters and a riding vest, his biceps and chest muscles prominently outlined. My first thought was, this is the most attractive man I've ever seen wearing sleeve garters and a riding vest. The man dismounted, walked toward me, and said his first words. Hello, Miss Jones. James ended his call, smiling. I'm James. To my surprise, James and I got along quite well. He was mature and gentlemanly in every way. From the dishes he ordered, the topics we discussed, to the flowers he gave me after dinner, everything was thoughtful and pleasant. There was a sense of intimacy, a mutual understanding, while maintaining clear boundaries. Though if we didn't get closer soon, it might be too late. After all, our engagement was imminent. After dinner, James drove me home. The car was a high-clearance off-road vehicle, and I struggled a bit to climb in. James helped me in and explained with some embarrassment, I visited a field site today, and this car was more convenient. After graduating, he had left his family's traditional fast-moving consumer goods business and started a biotech company of his own. I teased him. Must be tough for James to squeeze in time for dinner with me. You can't say that, he replied seriously, looking at me with those deep eyes. You're busy with work too. This is something I should do. I stared at his deep gaze for a few seconds and messaged Amelia. Mature men are terrifying. Ha. See, mature men are the real deal. What were you into before? I had no rebuttal. After all, I used to go for younger guys. Young and fiery little wolves are great, but when they're too fiery, they get on your nerves. When we arrived at my apartment, I ran right into one of those nerve-wracking little wolves. The little wolf's name was Liam, and my friends jokingly called him my white moonlight. It wasn't wrong. Liam and I had been tangled up since our days studying abroad in North America. We even got back together once. My personality is such that if I'm willing to reconcile, willing to eat grass I've grazed before, then calling him my white moonlight is fair. He's also the person I've dated the longest. Before I got out of the car, James noticed Liam leaning against his motorcycle downstairs. But James's first reaction was different. That man's behavior seemed suspicious. Is this area safe? I hesitated for a few seconds before deciding to tell the truth. He's my ex-boyfriend. James paused. Sorry, do you need me to leave? His composure was impressive. No need, I said. It'll just take a few minutes. I was actually going to invite you up. If you don't mind, we can plan for another time, James replied, frowning. He's seen you. Liam had indeed spotted me. His previously aggrieved expression turned sour when he saw James and the car. Who's this, sis? Liam's tone wasn't pleasant. James raised an eyebrow at the word sis. My headache started right then. Liam was 5 years younger than me, and in most cases, I was indulgent and overly tolerant of him because of the age gap. Friends often teased, Liam's like this because you spoiled him. Reckless, impulsive, and extreme in both good and bad. I recall we broke up 2 months ago, I said coldly. I was preparing for the F1 competition back then, training at the base, Liam said, clearly unhappy. Who is he? My fiancé, I replied coolly. Liam, ever confident in my favoritism, didn't take our breakup 2 months ago seriously. After all, we had reconciled once before. You cheated on me? Liam looked incredulous. Are you seriously using that excuse just to get back at me? Anger surged within me, and I was ready to end this nonsense quickly. But James, who had been silent, spoke up. Excuse me, sir, he said, stepping out of the car and positioning himself slightly in front of me. Olivia made it clear in her first sentence. You two broke up 2 months ago. I trust you've received an education that enables basic comprehension. James, at 6 feet 2 inches and with years of fitness training, towered over Liam, whose aura seemed pale in comparison. Making baseless accusations of infidelity. Does that reflect your upbringing? James added. Liam took a step back, choosing not to confront James directly. A wise move, as always. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes reddening, and softened his tone. Sis. I responded. He's my fiancé. Our engagement is next month. Liam was able to stay with me for so long primarily because he knew exactly how to make me happy. In the past 2 years, we had never argued. The reason? No matter how upset I got, Liam would always cheerfully coax me. This meant, however, that our conflicts were never properly addressed, let alone resolved. I initiated the breakup, and it was mutually acknowledged. I said, if you don't believe me, you can check the chat logs. Liam looked hurt. This was the first time I had ever been so unfeeling toward him. I sighed, unable to deny that his pitiful expression still tugged at my heartstrings. Liam gave me a long, deep look before choking out a futile threat. You'd better not regret this. His inherent pride would never allow him to cling. With that, Liam turned and mounted his motorcycle. The roar of the engine faded into the distance as I turned to James, feeling a bit embarrassed. Sorry you had to see that. James shook his head, hesitated for a moment, and then said, about relationships, you might have heard a thing or two about mine. I nodded. Compared to me, who had endless rumors and switched boyfriends like clockwork after I came of age, James had only one notable romantic entanglement. His crimson mark, Mia. Do you still keep in touch with her? James gave a bitter smile and shook his head. Not since 4 years ago, after what happened. Then what's the big deal? Every adult has a past or two in love. It's not like you've been promiscuous, I said, then laughed. Besides, you've probably heard about my reputation too. I've had more than just 1 or 2. Does that bother you? Don't put it that way, James replied, meeting my gaze earnestly. It's not about whether it bothers me. You've treated every relationship seriously. In fact, I've had some work interactions with your exes after the fact. His tone was sincere. In casual conversation, they all spoke highly of you. They said you're an interesting person. Honestly, I'm more worried about being too rigid and boring for you. Goodness. Mature men really are dangerous. If I'd known earlier how wonderful they could be, I wouldn't have earned the nickname the guide to dating younger guys. That evening, James didn't come upstairs. Instead, as we parted ways, he draped his suit jacket over my shoulders, covering my spaghetti strap dress. The jacket carried a faint, cool scent, not overpowering, much like James himself, composed and effortlessly elegant. Amelia was amazed by this gesture. A true master, she said, clicking her tongue. How so? I asked. He's subtly securing a second meeting. If you're not interested in him, you'll forget about the jacket. But if you are, you'll have to return it, giving him a clear read on your intentions. As I carried the freshly laundered jacket to James's office, I thought. You're good at dealing with younger guys, sure, Amelia had added. But with James? You'd better keep your guard up. When I arrived at James's office building, it was close to the end of the workday. After James texted me, I took his private elevator to his floor. The receptionist greeted me warmly. Mr. James's meeting will wrap up in about 10 minutes, Miss Jones. Please have a seat. James's office reflected his character. minimalist yet sophisticated, with little personal touches that revealed his personality. A Switch console, a pool cue mounted on the wall, and a DSLR camera on the shelf, all glimpses of his private life. 10 minutes later, James emerged from his meeting, carrying a meticulously arranged bouquet of Earl Grey roses. Blooming with fiery confidence, he leaned down and handed the flowers to me, seated on the sofa. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Consider this an apology gift. I hope you like them." How high were Mia's standards to reject someone like James? What's gotten into you? Mia's issues were more about her own hang-ups. She was insecure, yet proud. If she'd been more open-minded, your engagement wouldn't have happened. Do me a favor and look into what exactly went down between James and Mia. As I tapped on my phone, reading my conversation with Amelia, I found myself lost in thought. James and Mia's story had been quite infamous back in the day. Mia had been a stellar student who gained admission to James's international high school as a scholarship student. Despite their love, the gap in family backgrounds led to vehement opposition from both sets of parents. I'd even heard snippets of their story when I was preparing to study abroad. Mia had applied to a university in Germany, where tuition was cheaper, and James had followed her there. James had once fought against his family for Mia, leaving behind the established family business to start his own venture. In those early days, he faced significant struggles. One of my ex-boyfriends who had worked with James had said he gave up the easy path laid out for him just to eat dirt. Later, as James grew more successful, his family relented and gave their blessing to the relationship. But by then, Mia had broken up with him. Allegedly, it was a nasty breakup, with no semblance of grace. That was according to Surprise, another of my ex-boyfriends. I glanced at James as he reversed the car, struggling to reconcile the image of this composed and elegant man with the reckless youth he must have once been. Just then, my phone vibrated. Amelia had sent a message. Got the scoop. Back then, Mia didn't just break up with him. She took James's core project team and jumped ship to a rival company. Then she got together with that company's operations director, Noah. Me. Wow. This woman outdid even me. James chose the restaurant, and the dishes were also ordered by him. After hearing what he ordered, I was surprised to realize that James had figured out my taste preferences after just one meal together. James, however, remained calm about it. "It's nothing. If you pay attention, you can remember anything," he said. I took a sip of wine to conceal my emotions. I had never received this kind of thoughtful care from Liam. Because of our age difference, I was used to being the one to take charge of ordering meals. During dinner, the conversation flowed easily, and I became even more certain that neither of us was compromising or accommodating the other. James and I were genuinely compatible, whether it was our values or our interests. We talked about everything from Nintendo to work, and James surprised me again with how well he knew about my current work situation. "I thought you wouldn't be interested in fashion design," I admitted, feeling a bit guilty since I hadn't paid much attention to his work. Not to brag, James clinked glasses with me and smiled, but I do have a decent sense of aesthetics. This was undeniably true. From his sense of style to his choice of flowers and restaurants, James's taste could easily be described as sophisticated. The meal was delightful, and after dinner, James handed me a small blue gift box. "I got this on a business trip. It reminded me of you. I hope you like it." I opened it to find a sapphire bracelet that sparkled brilliantly under the light. I put it on in front of him, but the clasp was so delicate that James leaned over to help fasten it for me. Smiling, I took his arm. "Thank you. I absolutely love it." James chuckled softly, his right cheek dimpling. I was still admiring the bracelet as we exited the elevator. James seemed uncharacteristically regretful. "If I knew you'd love it this much, I would have gotten the matching necklace too." Before I could respond, a surprised female voice called out ahead of us. "James?" Beside me, James froze for a moment before his expression turned neutral. "Miss Moore," he replied politely. Mia was petite, with delicate features and dressed in a sleek gray business suit. Her demeanor was sharp and professional, making her quite captivating. However, her smile vanished the moment she saw me holding onto James's arm, though she quickly replaced it with a polite expression. She glanced at me. And this is? Raising an eyebrow, I found her directness amusing. Instead of starting with small talk, she immediately asked who I was. Her demeanor didn't quite match the rumors of a cold and callous breakup. It seemed likely she still had feelings for James. Lowering my wrist slightly, I let the sapphire bracelet catch the light and smiled. Hello, I'm Olivia, James's fiancée. Mia's expression faltered entirely, disbelief evident in her eyes as she looked at James. Her voice pitched higher, almost shrill. You're engaged? James nodded calmly. We're getting engaged next month. The wedding will take more preparation since it's such a big event. I tugged at James's sleeve, fully playing along. Mia lowered her head to brush back her hair. When she looked up again, her expression was strained, but still passable. Really? She asked softly. Here for dinner? I remember we used to love the food here. I haven't been back in ages. I wonder if it still tastes the same. I couldn't help but laugh softly. James glanced at me, then gently squeezed the hand I had on his arm in reassurance. I come here often with friends, so I've gotten used to it. I don't notice much of a difference, James said in a warm tone. But their local dishes are still excellent. My fiancée is a local and has a spicy palate. She just got back to the country recently, so I wanted to impress her. As he finished speaking, I looked at Mia, finally understanding that someone's face could truly drain of color. Well then, I won't keep you, Mia said with forced politeness. James nodded courteously. Have a good evening. We'll take our leave now. The drive back to my apartment was silent. When we arrived, James rested his hand on the steering wheel and exhaled softly. I'm sorry if this upset you. I looked at him in surprise. I wasn't upset. I paused, deciding to be honest. Okay, maybe a little, but not because of Mia, because you seemed down for the rest of the evening. It wasn't because of Mia, James said, running a hand over his face. If I still had feelings for her, I wouldn't be engaged to you. It's just... His voice lowered. Seeing her brings back bad memories. I tentatively reached for James's hand, gently stroking it. I owe you an apology. I had someone look into the reason you and Mia broke up. No need to apologize. Everyone knows about it anyway, James said, intertwining his fingers with mine. Even if you hadn't, I would have told you eventually. I couldn't help but laugh. Then why is that? I asked. Her behavior is really hard to figure out. I don't know either, James replied with a bitter smile. Maybe she hates me. We dated for 2 years, then kept breaking up and getting back together. With my family and her mother constantly interfering, our relationship was more painful than happy. Looking back, most of our time was filled with shouting matches. Near the end, she pitted me for breaking away from the James family to make a life on my own. But she'd cry, then yell at me, and after yelling, she'd come to hug me. James seemed lost in his memories. We studied the same major and naturally started a business together. She was undeniably talented, everyone acknowledged that, but she always felt her value couldn't be realized in my company. She thought everyone believed she achieved her position solely because of me. I gave her gifts. If they were too expensive, she'd make sarcastic remarks. If they were too cheap or I didn't give any, she'd accuse me of not caring about her. James turned to look at me, smiling faintly. Maybe I just didn't do enough to make her feel secure. I swung our joined hands slightly. You're saying in front of your fiancé that you didn't make your ex feel secure? For the first time, James's expression was rich with emotion, embarrassment, and panic. I didn't mean it that way. I laughed. I know. I'm just teasing you. Is it true that she switched to your competitor's company? It is. James paused. Actually, by that time, my family had already relented, but I hesitated. Our relationship wasn't very healthy anymore, and there was a major disagreement between us on a key project. She became overly fixated on that disagreement, insisting that I validate her viewpoint. In the end, it wasn't about the issue anymore. It was just her venting her emotions. I listened quietly. Our company lost that project to the competitor, and I decided to reshuffle the senior management team and took half a month off. And the rest, James glanced at our clasped hands. You already know. I asked softly, why did she do it? She said she was jealous of me, James said after a moment of silence. Jealous of how smoothly everything seemed to go for me, of how I was born into the James family, and she said I trampled on her dignity. Don't think about it like that, I said as I let go of his hand, unbuckled my seatbelt, and leaned over to hug him. We've talked about it today, so let's never bring it up again. James's embrace had a cool, comforting scent. Given our size difference, I fit entirely in his arms. I leaned up and kissed the tip of his nose. A kiss, and all the bad feelings are gone. James's ears slowly turned red. He lowered his gaze, his thick lashes trembling slightly, and softly asked, "Just here?" Goodness. For the countless time, I thought to myself, James is such a dangerous man. Later, while lying on the couch chatting with Amelia, I said, kissing a mature man is so different, gentle and gradual, like being slowly devoured. Amelia's tone was cold. Pure me doesn't want to know any of this. Don't be ridiculous. Weren't you the one who shared about your ex being too fast? As we bickered, James messaged me, saying he'd arrived home. Then he asked if I had time next week to discuss the engagement venue, attire, and related details. I immediately checked my schedule. I had boxing practice next weekend, so I asked my secretary to reschedule. I told him I'd be free. James sent a soft cartoon cat sticker with the words, "Okay," bouncing above its head. I paused for a second and silently covered my face, collapsing onto the couch. My phone buzzed again. James added, "When I said I brought you to that restaurant to please you, I meant it. It wasn't because of Mia." I couldn't stop laughing, lying back on the couch. For me, this level of contentment was rare. But what did it matter? After all, James valued me deeply too. How lovely mutual devotion is when it's genuine and sincere. I had envisioned James and me picking out a wedding dress together, selecting a honeymoon destination, and designing our wedding rings. But I never thought he'd even have opinions about nail art. I was utterly shocked. Isn't there supposed to be a gender barrier for this kind of thing? Beautiful things are universal, aren't they? James gently held my hand. His hand was a size larger than mine, easily encompassing it. Besides, I want to understand the things you like better. I used my other hand to cover my face, muffling my voice. James, you're terrifying. James tilted his head, looking a bit confused, but still smiled at me. Although I don't do nail art often, I said, swinging our clasped hands slightly. I box, so long nails are really inconvenient. It's no exaggeration to say that at that moment, I saw undeniable joy and delight in James's deep eyes. I had a feeling you worked out, James said, his gaze soft as he kissed the back of my hand. Your physique is both healthy and beautiful. He looked up at me, his eyes warm. How about adding boxing to our dates? I've been boxing for many years. We didn't wait for another date. After deciding on wedding attire that same day, we headed straight to a boxing gym. Well, calling it a gym might not do it justice. It was more like an upscale fitness club with strict membership requirements. I had applied when I first returned to the country, but was unfortunately rejected. James helped me wrap my hands. When I mentioned my earlier rejection, he seemed a bit sheepish, his voice low as he said, "Sorry, I pulled some strings for you." I blinked in confusion. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's co-owned by me and a friend from grad school. I have a stake in it." I was utterly charmed by his bashfulness, reaching out with my wrapped hand to lightly scratch his chin. "Well then, thank you, Mr. James." Boxing with James was exhilarating. He was an excellent sparring partner. Though I was no match for his strength or stamina, he never stopped praising my punches. I had confidence in my technique, but his relentless compliments felt almost reckless. During a break, James introduced me to Lucas, the co-owner of the club and his longtime friend. Lucas was polite and respectful, with a strong sense of boundaries. After some pleasantries, he said with a smile, "I've heard about you for years. Now that we've met, I see you live up to the name." How could someone sound so sincere without being remotely cheesy? While James and Lucas discussed the gym's operations, I excused myself to shower, leaving them space to talk. When I returned, however, I found an unexpected visitor. Mia was there, dressed in workout clothes, handing a water bottle to James. I hesitated, holding the water I'd brought for him, then quietly stepped closer. "Did you come alone?" Mia asked, lowering the bottle when James didn't take it. Her tone carried a hint of self-mockery. "You won't even accept a bottle of water from me now." "I came with Olivia," James said flatly as he unwrapped his hand wraps, his tone distant. "Really? You're teaching her to box now?" Mia asked, forcing a smile. "She doesn't need me to teach her. Olivia has been boxing for years, she's very good," James said casually, his words making me smile despite myself. "I remember when you used to teach me on weekends," Mia said wistfully. "I was terrible at it, wasn't I?" "You didn't have the habit of working out, so it's only natural you didn't do well," James replied evenly. "You could ask Noah to teach you now, he's quite skilled." Mia's face turned pale instantly. "James, do you hate me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Not really." James glanced in my direction, a warm smile breaking across his face. Then he turned back to Mia and said, "Miss Moore, my fiancé is here. We'll be leaving now." He picked up his gloves and walked toward me. Mia's gaze followed him before locking onto mine. She raised her voice. "James, after all those years we spent together, what did they mean to you?" James took the water I handed him, turning back briefly to reply, "Time." I couldn't help but laugh, sticking my tongue out playfully. James wrapped his arm around my shoulders as we walked away. "Lucas suggested dinner later. Do you like Italian?" "Sure," I replied. "By the way, sorry for eavesdropping earlier." "What do you mean eavesdropping?" "You were listening openly and honestly," James teased, dimples showing as he smiled. "Lucas was worried you'd misunderstand if you saw Mia, but now it's all cleared up." For some reason, in that moment, he reminded me of a smug cat swishing its tail. Dinner was delightful. As we said our goodbyes, Lucas added me on WhatsApp and pulled me into their group chat. Scrolling through the members, I was surprised. "Henry's in this group too? Are you childhood friends?" Henry's younger brother had been my first love. Our breakup had been a dramatic mess in our reckless youth, leaving me a bit uneasy. James nodded. "Henry's brother went to high school abroad. I don't have much contact with him." I studied James's expression. "Does it bother you?" "Honestly, a little," he admitted, taking my hand. "But they're part of the past, and I'm your future. I'll do everything I can to make sure you never regret it." The engagement party was held at a seaside hotel. The night before, both families had dinner together. The families had long-standing ties and an excellent relationship, which made things seamless. After the meal, James's mother slipped an heirloom jade bracelet onto my wrist. It was stunning, both in value and sentiment. The elegant woman gently touched my face, smiling. "You two take good care of each other." After seeing the families off, James and I stayed at the hotel. Post-shower, we ended up lounging in pajamas, playing Super Mario. At one point, I rested my head on James's lap, causing his leg muscles to tense briefly before relaxing. I turned my head, giggling into his stomach. "Poppy," he sighed, exasperated yet indulgent. "You're getting more and more brazen." Poppy was my nickname, a relic from childhood when I was chubby like a dumpling. My family had been calling me that all evening, much to my embarrassment. I retaliated by poking his abs. James leaned back, sprawling onto the carpet, taking me down with him. I lay atop him, smirking. "Don't like it?" "Saying I don't like it would be a lie," he admitted, wrapping his arms around me. "But it feels a bit fast." I poked his chest again. "Why did you agree to the engagement in the first place?" James took my hand in his gaze meeting mine. "You might not like hearing this, but I want to be honest. At first, it just seemed suitable. My previous relationship was exhausting. It felt like the whole world was against us, and my immaturity hurt my parents," James said, gently pinching the tip of my finger. "I just wanted a relationship where both families were supportive, one that felt smooth and natural." When our families first suggested the idea of an arranged marriage, I Actually saw you at my horse ranch, James continued. You just returned to the country and immediately picked the wildest horse in the stable. I watched from the balcony as you tamed it completely. Olivia, you're captivating. James lowered his eyes and kissed my fingertips lightly. You're strong and full of life. Every day with you feels worth living to the fullest. My face started heating up. James kissed my forehead and said, Poppy, you're the best decision I've ever made. The engagement party was a great success. James's company released an announcement congratulating us, and our circles of friends began to overlap because of it. The only unexpected event was Liam showing up at the party. That kid must have a screw loose. He barged into the dressing room and asked if I'd elope with him. Everyone present. I know this is a forced family arrangement, Liam said, looking tortured. I'm sorry for being so reckless before, for not understanding your struggles. But let's run away together, just the two of us. Liam grabbed my hand. Let's leave it all behind and build a simple, happy life. Me. Amelia crossed her arms, smirking. Little brother, your current tasks are to graduate college and get into a good graduate program. The dressing room erupted into laughter. I sighed helplessly. Liam, the past 2 years were good, truly. But we're done. Yes, this engagement is partly about family, I said softly, my words cutting despite my gentle tone. But another part of it is that I like James. Do you understand? You need to grow up. After Liam left, Amelia laughed so hard, she was out of breath. Serves him right. I told you not to date someone barely out of their teens. I covered my face. Don't remind me. It was a moment of insanity. James probably knew about the whole thing. But being the mature man he was, he knew what to ask and what to ignore. Or maybe he just didn't see Liam as a threat. Later, as he slipped the engagement ring onto my finger, he gently brought my hand to his lips and kissed it. Smiling at me, he said, I'll make sure you're always happy. After the engagement, I moved into James's downtown apartment. James was someone who valued quality of life and had a strong sense of boundaries. This was evident from the apartment's design on the 50th floor. It was the epitome of elegance and order. The second thing I noticed was how James was 100% used to living alone. But that was about to change. James dragged my luggage into the walk-in closet. The housekeeper comes 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, while we're at work, so there won't be any interruptions. I've already had them clear out half the closet. Let's figure out the best way to arrange your clothes. Sitting on the armrest of the sofa, James took my hand and said, After I broke up with Mia, I lived here alone for 4 years. Other than me and the housekeeper, no one's ever been here. He looked into my eyes with such warmth. So don't feel uncomfortable. I stepped forward, wrapped my arms around his neck, and kissed him. The transition to living together went more smoothly than I expected. James had thoughtfully prepared duplicates of all my usual toiletries and cosmetics. Neither of us had bad habits, and we both liked planning and keeping things orderly. The only issue was my chaotic sleeping posture. On the first morning, I woke up with my leg draped over James's waist. His dark circles said it all. I'd kept him up all night. But we found a solution. When James held my waist as we slept, my wild posture seemed to calm down. I also discovered one of James's endearing quirks. He could be a bit of a sleepyhead. After working late, he struggled to wake up the next morning. When I pinched his nose to wake him up, he'd frown and burrow under the covers, mumbling, "Just 2 more minutes." I was utterly charmed. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Baby, you're such a little lazy pig." As soon as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. James was a 6 feet 2 inches man with the poise of a boardroom leader, not one of my playful, younger exes. This probably wasn't the right way to tease him. The next moment, I noticed James's ears gradually turning bright red. He grumbled softly, "Is this how you used to coax your ex-boyfriends?" I quickly replied, "From now on, I'll only coax you." It was only later that I realized he liked it. In the second month after our engagement, Liam, who had been quiet since his dramatic disruption at the engagement party, suddenly started acting up again. This included tearful apologies to our mutual friends about his past recklessness, sending me flowers daily, and even declaring his intent to win me back. I was overwhelmed and, for the first time, regretted my carefree romantic history, leaving a lingering leaf attached to me. Amelia mocked me. I warned you back then. You mess with a boy, and now you're stuck with his tantrums. The situation escalated, and Liam's antics became increasingly bold. Just as I was preparing to take stronger measures to cut things off cleanly, he suddenly stopped. I decided to ask James about it. It's nothing, James said casually, taking a sip of coffee. The company where he's interning belongs to a friend of mine. I just let him experience the harsh realities of the working world. Me. What? James softened his voice. Are you feeling sorry for him? I didn't answer, instead taking the coffee from his hand for a sip, surprised by the taste. Baby, why is this coffee sour? James turned his face away. Unable to hold back my laughter, I perched on his lap, wrapping my arms around his neck and kissing his cheek. Thank you, James. I'm not feeling sorry for him. I only feel sorry for you. James's dimples reappeared faintly. I kissed them, saying, Baby, you're the cutest. The cutest. James held me tightly, kissing me for 20 minutes straight until I was almost out of breath. What I hadn't expected, though, was that while my white moonlight issue was resolved, James's red mole began to act up. Mia sought me out directly. We arranged to meet at a cafe after work. As I arrived and sat down, her first words to me were, Miss Jones, you enjoy James's maturity and tenderness. But have you ever thought that his tenderness toward you is all because I trained him? I hadn't even taken a sip of my coffee before I burst out laughing. Mia's expression darkened. What are you laughing at? Miss Moore, before meeting you, people often described you as both self-deprecating and arrogant. I took a sip of my coffee. I used to wonder how such contradictory traits could coexist in one person. Meeting you today, I finally understand. Of course. How could I compare to you, Miss Jones? Born into privilege, your status is naturally higher than mine, Mia sneered. If I had your background, you wouldn't even stand a chance. Did James not stand by you then? He fought against his harmonious family for you and made countless efforts. And what did you give him in return? I answered her calmly. You stole his hard work, betrayed his loyalty and love, and left him with nothing but betrayal. Mia, are you lacking ability? You were the top scorer in the college entrance exams, completed your undergraduate and master's degrees in Germany on full scholarships. Ignoring external factors, I even admire you a lot. I never judge others' relationships, because love is something only the people involved can fully understand. I set my coffee down. But Mia, the things you said today made me feel James deserves so much better. James's maturity and tenderness didn't come from your training. They're a part of his nature. I continued. He inherently possesses a greater capacity for empathy. A good family upbringing pruned his edges, and life's challenges honed his self-awareness. He became the man he is today not because of anyone else, but because he never gave up on himself during his lowest moments. Mia's face turned pale, and she said nothing. In your relationship, the one who was hurt the most was always him. You should know that better than anyone. I stood up, grabbing my bag. Goodbye. As I left the cafe, I felt an indescribable emotion. My phone buzzed. It was James sending a cat emoji, wagging its tail, asking why I hadn't come to pick him up yet. I smiled. Today, I'd finished work early, and I had promised to pick him up. I replied to his message and stopped by a nearby florist to order a bouquet of white roses. I could already imagine the look of surprise on my big cat's face when he saw the flowers. Carrying the large bouquet of white roses, I stepped into the elevator just as rush hour hit. When I entered the lobby on the first floor, all eyes turned toward me. Caught off guard by the unusual attention, I quietly reflected. Aside from the conspicuous white roses, there wasn't anything particularly special about me. Occasionally, when I met someone's gaze, they'd even smile at me kindly. This question lingered until I arrived at James's office floor. The announcement was posted on the company website. James's secretary said with a smile. On your engagement day, the company even handed out red envelopes to everyone. I asked her, "How much did you get?" She showed me a gesture. "Thanks to you." I burst into laughter. "When we get married, I'll give you another one, from me personally." "Thank you in advance, then." She graciously brought me a cup of coffee. "There's been a sudden issue with the branch office. Otherwise, everyone would have already clocked out. Sorry to keep you waiting a bit longer." I waited for half an hour before James finally appeared. His face showed clear signs of fatigue, and he looked apologetic when he saw me. "We had plans, and I made you wait so long." "Work is like that," I said, spreading my arms from where I was sitting on the sofa. "Come here for a hug." James let go of his tension, leaning his entire weight into me and burying his head in the crook of my neck. With some effort, I picked up the bouquet of white roses from the side of the sofa and teased, "Here, flowers for you. Cheer up, baby." No exaggeration, James's eyes literally lit up at that moment. His long, thick lashes trembled slightly as he smiled, dimples showing. "I love them." Goodness. Dating James meant experiencing the dual charm of a mature man and an affectionate pup all at once. James was so easily delighted by just a bouquet of flowers. Even though he was usually so composed, I could sense some subtle excitement during dinner. That restlessness peaked when I told him Mia had come to see me. I recounted our conversation truthfully. After a long silence, James said, "Poppy, I'm not as good as you think." Looking straight into his eyes, I said, "James, you're exactly as good as I think." That night, for the first time, James drove faster than usual. When we arrived at the apartment, I asked him to stop by the nearby convenience store. James seemed tense, gripping the steering wheel. He might have guessed something. I teased him. "Are you sure you don't want to buy it?" The dim light inside the car revealed the slight reddening of James's ears. Pressing his fist against his lips, he turned his head away and muttered softly, "I've been prepared since we got engaged." Under my amused gaze, he lowered his eyes and added, "What I've prepared, it's all better quality." Suppressing my laughter, I nodded. Of course, James always selects the best. We walked hand in hand upstairs, his palm warm, as was mine. Fingerprint scan, door opened, door closed. The next second, I was pinned against the wall, and James's kisses rained down, passionate, tender, all-encompassing, and full of love. James expressed all his affection through his kisses. We stumbled towards the bedroom, spinning like two love-struck teenagers in our own little world. But there was a small surprise. James, despite his age and experience, turned out to be inexperienced. I stifled a laugh, but James, embarrassed and annoyed, bit my lower lip, looking up at me with a touch of grievance. "Teach me." I taught him with hands-on experience. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to train someone so well they surpassed the teacher. The next day, Amelia invited me for a girls' tea session and casually asked about the previous night. She had sharp eyes, and I didn't intend to hide anything. There was no need to. I thought for a moment. Better than any man I've ever been with. Amelia clicked her tongue. "You two are a perfect match in stamina." I accepted the compliment with a smile. After an engagement, setting a wedding date should naturally follow, but I was entering a new phase of my career. The company was sending me to the North American headquarters for a year of training. It was a rare opportunity that would significantly advance my career. Being mature individuals, neither of us argued about it. Without much discussion, we both agreed to postpone the wedding. Time flew by, filled with our kisses and embraces. As the year-end approached, James's company held its annual gala. James personally wrote the invitation, asking me to attend. Core team members who were close to James mostly recognized me. As soon as I arrived, I received an exceptionally warm welcome. After all, I was known for my generosity. James's secretary told me their internal chat group jokingly referred to me as the benevolent scatterer of wealth. At the event's climax, James took the stage amid applause to deliver his speech. He spoke about the past year's achievements and new aspirations. James rarely resorted to platitudes. His moderate pacing and warm tone made his words sincere and inspiring. After finishing his formal remarks, James shifted the tone of his speech amid the applause. This past year, I got engaged to the love of my life, marking the start of a new chapter. I froze for a moment, and the audience began to stir with excitement. In every pivotal moment of my life, I've always been grateful to myself for my persistence and refusal to give up, James continued with a small smile. But from now on, I'll only be grateful for the most important person in my life. Olivia, Miss Jones, the chief designer of Yuncheng. The crowd erupted in cheers and teasing shouts as every eye turned to me. My world was once encased in ice, barren and desolate, James said, his gaze focused intently on me. But with your arrival, the glaciers melted and the land bloomed with flowers. All other sounds faded away, leaving only James's gentle eyes in my vision. He smiled at me, paused, and then in a low voice said, Ich liebe dich.